at least based off what I read, I mean, there were a number of publishers who wanted this book.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the last count I read was 13 wanted this. Like it
Yeah,
was
it's
your book
13.
went to auction, I'm assuming, right? And
For
that's what,
13.
yeah,
Yeah.
that and because I remember when my memoir went to auction, I was just like,
Hmm.
people actually want to hear about.
Yeah.
It was mind blowing. So
It is.
I
It
do
is.
understand that. I had 4. You had 13. That's crazy. I know a lot of people make a lot of your age, but you said something in an interview that was like very fascinating to me. It's like you said something along the lines of that you didn't know if people were so fascinated by the fact that you wrote this book so young and have had this amount of success because people had such low expectations of
Hmm.
what young people can do.
Hmm.
So how do you handle the fact that people do seem to be quite fascinated
Yeah.
with your age?
I have kind of lived my whole life experiencing the fascination with my age. So I'm pretty used to it. But I also kind of try to remind myself that as much as I hear it, there's so much else in that sentiment that um that adults are really surprised that young people can really do anything. Um and I think that I've come to understand it as like we get so detached and removed from our like teenage selves, partially because when we exit adolescence we start like having all of this judgment for our younger selves, and that also frames the way in which we think about other young people. And so I think that when people look at me, they go, you're an exception to the way that I see young people. And and for me, I don't see myself as an exception. I think that the amount of like attention that I've received is an exception. But that is also because our culture doesn't really value young people. And so I think I know so many talented young people who have things to say, and who, you know, could be doing all of these things that I think would surprise a lot of adults. But that doesn't happen because we rarely acknowledge that young people have something to say that isn't like through the lens of our own ideas about what we might have had to say at 16, 17, which I think is probably a lot more complex than any of us will ever give our younger selves credit for. But I think a part of it is also like there is something special about being inside of kind of the strange um experience of youth, where like you're kind of isolated in this depth of feeling and emotion, and being kind of not seen or respected by people older than you, but also like feeling a need to get away from your childhood. And I think a lot comes out of that period, that if we gave it more space and more credit, I think we'd probably be surprised.
What is the most touching reaction for you when you run into people who say, "Hey, I
Mm,
read your book and I thought this about it." Like, what is it that they say about your book that really strikes a chord with you?
mm. I mean, when Black women and Black girls like tell me that this is something that they like needed, um and that always means the most to me. And you know, when people from Oakland say like, I see my city in this, and I mean, I think we just get so few books that recognize us as like central characters that have like these rich and full complex internal worlds, and especially with like Black teenage girls. And I think so few of us get to experience what it's like to be recognized as vulnerable people in the world. And so getting to read that, getting to see that, and having people reflect that back to me about the book has been really special.
So, to give people out there listening an idea what the book is about, the loose notes are this: is the central character, Kiara, is a young woman growing up. She has an older. Oh no, I think her brother Marcus is older or younger. I can't
He's three
remember.
years older, yeah.
he's 3 years older. She's an older brother. He has dreams of being a rapper. They're growing up in the heart of Oakland. And through a bunch of different circumstances, she winds up becoming a sex worker.
Mhm.
And this story was based off loosely. It wasn't directly based off of, but it was sparked by
Mhm.
a corruption case in Oakland that took place in 2016. And
Mhm.
I've heard you say this before, but that you were surprised at how few people knew about it. And I have
Yeah.
to say, until your book, I did not know about
Mhm.
this corruption case that involved a sex worker who was being exploited by the
Mhm.
police that resulted in a whole bunch of other things. But it's humane, it's compassionate, it's gripping, it's
Thank
sorrowful, it's
you.
all these other. It brings out so many different emotions. So when you first started to write this, which you began as a 16-year-old,
Mhm.
why did you pick this story?
I knew I wanted to tell the story of a teenage Black girl, and I wanted the spectrum of the experience of what like childhood and kind of being in the limbo of being told you're an adult and treated like an adult from such a young age, like so many Black girls are, but also being kind of not respected in the way that we think we would respect adults, and that strange like dissonance that I think so many of us who experience being pushed into adulthood so early, and being asked to care for the people around us, which is a tradition that Black women have taken on for forever. And so I wanted to tell the story of what that feels like and what comes out of that, and how we can find ways to reclaim ourselves and our ability to experience things outside of just caring for other people.
um Even though the corruption case
Hmm.
sparked this, like
Yeah.
the book is not really about that. I mean, it
No.
is about all those things that you just talked about. How Black girls are not seen, the vulnerability.
Hmm.
Uh, in what ways, as a Black girl, as you were growing up,
Hmm.
did you not feel seen?
I mean, in so many ways, I think one, the experience of being in a city like Oakland, in a city like Detroit, when you're, a 15-year-old Black girl, like it is lonely, and it's this strange conjunction of feeling like at home, and like a deep love for your city and your people, and at the same time feeling kind of unseen and unprotected in it. And I think that that's a role that we have been placed in a way that it almost feels so natural we don't question it. And so I remember, like, as an 11-year-old, I started getting followed home and harassed, and it just didn't stop. And i um and I remember not like ever feeling like anyone prepared me for what that experience was going to be like, but also where to look to, who to look to, when I felt deeply unsafe. Um and I think that that's both a repercussion of our system of policing, and also the ways in which our entire culture is oriented around expecting Black girls and women to be strong and not be in need. And so I think that when we look at police sexual violence, this is like another way in which the state attempts to tell us and show us that Black women are not important, and will not be protected.